many people and leaders are saying remote bad, in-person good for the culture. It's both. You can have both. You just have to change the way in which you work and the way you deal with your people. Mm-hmm. You can't do it the old-fashioned way like you would if you bumped into him in the water cooler. You have to think very deliberately, I haven't seen John in a while. I'm going to just ping him and see how he's doing. But to just throw up your hands and say, well, I'm sorry, he's in Kentucky, and so he just takes his career in his hands, is just really myopic, I think. The world is much different now.
Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Super excited to be joined by Jill Campbell, President and Chief People and Operations Officer at Cox Enterprises. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, thanks, Chris. I'm good. Glad to be here.
Nice to see you. Where are you joining us from in the world?
I'm doing it from my home office in a little town outside of Atlanta called Serenbe, Georgia.
Right, it's very
a
very
wellness
quiet.
Community. People should look it up. It's very zen. It's a very idyllic. Yeah.
Is that why you moved there? Is that why you moved there?
I lived there. Moved here during the pandemic. I was tired of being in Atlanta and thought I need more trees and more of a community feel, and that's what I got. It's just nice. Gorgeous.
Did it take you time to settle into that lifestyle? Just out of curiosity, after being in sort of the city?
No, I settled in really darn quick. And then when we had to go back to the office, several days a week, and I have to drive in, it could be an hour and a half to drive into Atlanta. So that part I have not settled into that really well, the going back to the office part. But boy, I settled into country living pretty quickly. It's nice. It's peaceful. People are really, really nice out here. So it's just a laid back kind of feeling. So when I come back from work or when I sign off from work on Zoom, I just go out, take a walk in the forest and sit on my porch and have a drink with one of the neighbors. It's perfect.
Amazing. Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So what's the current setup now? Are you working mainly from home and then traveling a couple of days? What?
It's really a hybrid. What we decided at Cox now a couple of years ago when, it sounded so cool. Ooh, when we come back in a week or two, we're going to do whatever. And 2 years later, when we came back, we told our teams and our leaders, it's up to you. You're empowered to make your decisions about how and where and when you want to work. And we asked each of the leaders to do what we called a team agreement, where they said, okay, when do we need to be in the office together? When is it okay to work at home? Who has daycare issues or, who might need more time to be in the office because they have a roommate that's driving them crazy. And each one of them came up with when they're going to be in the office and when they're not. Now, I will say that's an experiment. It's evolving because we've still had teams going, this isn't working what we came up with. We're going to have to try something else. We're finding most people are in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then they're remote Friday and Monday. And that makes the office feel really empty. I will tell you, on Friday, it's like, if you go in, you think, why am I here? Because nobody's here. So I think we're going to start to see people change that up a little bit. But it took 2 years of people changing their lifestyle to go fully remote. So I think it's going to take a while for people to figure out the groove of how they want to work.
Yeah.
When it's important to be in person, right?
That's fair, right? And because also we have to understand that it shouldn't be binary because we have different stages in our lives where we may want to work, this 6 months I'm going to be doing this. And, maybe you've now had a kid and now you want to do it differently, right? It shouldn't. And also there should be that freedom that we try it out and say, actually, I don't want to do this. I've tried that out and I realized, you know what? I do want to be in the office more to collaborate with a team, or I don't want to because no one's in. I'm going on Fridays and no one's here. So I think that's the fact that you've empowered your teams and your leaders to have that conversation and make decisions individually. Yes, you have those guiding principles, but it's from policies to principles now, and then freedom within the framework, right?
Absolutely. And what we're finding is people want to come in the office to network, to see other people, to do big team strategic discussions. They don't want to come in like they used to and sit in their office and do their email and have one person at a time coming in their office to meet them and they never see more than one or two people during the day anyway. You can do that on Zoom. But I think, to maintain your culture and make sure that people feel engaged and that they're getting to know people, in our company, we're very relationship based. And so it's important to us that people get to know each other. We want people coming in to do that. So that means sitting in the cafe and just, having coffee with a couple colleagues and get to know them. That's a really good reason to be in the office. If you're coming into the office to sit and do Zoom calls all day or work on email, you're not getting that human connection in person. You don't really need to be in the office to do that. That's really how I look at it.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find more things for people to want to come into the office for. We had something called a spring fling last week. Oh my God. We had half of our Atlanta corporate team there, and we had axe throwing and massages and free food, and we had a speaker on happiness. And what was so incredible was watching people hugging. I'm sure we were a super spreader, hugging all day long because they hadn't seen some of these people in 2-3 years. And, just taking selfies and just this pure joy. It was really fantastic. So more reasons to get together like that, I think, will help people want to get back into the groove of coming into the office.
Isn't it interesting that in the past that wasn't really seen as work or important? You just said the idea of everyone getting together in a cafeteria and have a conversation. That's just as important as the time that they're sitting down actually doing task-oriented activities and work, right? In the past, we never even looked at it that way. We saw that as just, I don't know, lunch.
Right. It was just, I'm taking a break. But it is really important. I think we learned that with a lot of folks that we hired during COVID that were Zoom babies. They didn't ever meet anybody. And now that they're back in the office, they're like, well, now I kind of feel like I'm getting to know them on a personal level, which is so important to build that trust. When you get into an issue or something that you have to then have a candid conversation, if you really don't know that person, that's going to be problematic. So that is work, is building those teams and really understanding, who somebody is that you're dealing with day in and day out. You're not going to get that via Zoom. And I found, I don't know about you, but when I was on even a one-on-one with Zoom, we'd be like, hi, how was your weekend? Good. Okay, kids, good. Okay. And then you'd get right into the meat of it. But in person, now that we're back in and I'm meeting people over coffee, it's much deeper and richer. And we're having longer personal kinds of conversations before we get into the business. And that's building that relationship trust. And that's not something I think you can easily do on Zoom.
No, you're right. And you made a good point. When those challenging times come, if you know Chris, not just the Chris Rainey, but Chris the dad, Chris the husband, Chris the, and you know that where that person's coming from, their point of view, what they've been through, maybe personally, professionally, the goods and bad times, you're happy to go above and beyond and cover for them, or you're happy, or you understand, you have empathy that, what, Chris can't be here today at the meeting because he's got to feed his child. All of those things that you don't see behind the camera, for example, on Zoom, those are the things that bond everyone together, where you will again go above and beyond and have that understanding when those times come. Yeah,
I think that's right. Yeah.
How have you found? We're going to talk about culture a lot, but how have you found building sort of a people-centric culture in a hybrid environment?
I think you have to be really deliberate. And it's a combo of the things we just talked about. When people are in, you're deliberate that your team's getting together, that they're in person, and you have some deal stoppers. If you want your team to be together, you need to say, whenever we have a team meeting, and it's once a month or whatever it is, I really want all of us to be together. That's part of that team agreement, so that everybody has said, no, I agree. And it's not just the leader telling them you need to come in. So they all know that once a month on Wednesdays, they're going to be in all day and they're going to do specific things together. So that's, I think, the first one. The other is, if you have people that are fully remote, which we do, then you make sure that there's once a quarter, they come in for an all-employee meeting, they come in for one of your team meetings, whatever that is, you get that face time. That's important. But if you have people who are predominantly remote and just in once a week, a couple times a week, then I think you have to be very, very, very deliberate in making the time to just chat with them. So we started something during the pandemic called Random Coffee. And we literally, people would sign up and we would put them with somebody else in the organization to get to know. And it could be a leader, it could be just a fellow. And people loved that because it was a connection. And out of that, what we said to leaders is, make sure you take time. You do one-on-ones, but make sure you do one that's nothing to do with work. It's just, how are you feeling? What's going on in your world? Tell me what's new. And personal conversation, as if you were just sitting down having coffee. And I think if you do those things and then you remember people that you used to run into in the cafe or the hallway that may not be in your team or your broader team, you have to be deliberate about just setting up time saying, I don't have an agenda. I just miss you and I want to say hello. And you do it on Zoom. Because what I keep hearing from people and our leaders is, well, if you're going to be remote, you probably won't get promoted or you're going to get overlooked because you're not in the fray. And that's ridiculous. I mean, productivity still continues to happen when people are at home. It's that they're not building the trust in the relationship. So I think it's more on the leader to really reach out and connect with their folks and others in the organization to ensure that they are continuing to build those relationships.
Yeah, no, I love that. You definitely have to be deliberate. You're not going to bump into someone on Zoom anymore. No. You need to make that. I think back to your point earlier, it's just even more important with new hires that are joining the business that don't have that network, that aren't exposed to the different part of the business. They can feel very isolated. That's definitely the feedback I'm getting from friends and family members that are just joining companies. They don't get to really feel what the culture is. We know when you're in the office and there's a sense of this is who this company is. You can feel it, if that makes sense, in the room, the conversations, and also from an innovation perspective, you want to be able to connect different departments, the functions, individuals, which is going to foster that innovation in the organization and be that sort of connective tissue for the business.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, obviously it can be done. There are global companies that, operate just fine where somebody's in Italy and somebody else is in India. But that depends on the business too and what you're trying to accomplish. There's a reason for years people got on a plane, and headed to China so that they could have meetings with somebody there. So I don't think it's an either or. And I think that's the problem today. Many people and leaders are saying remote bad, in-person good for the culture. And I think it's both. You can have both. You just have to change the way in which you work and the way you deal with your people. Mm-hmm. You can't do it the old-fashioned way like you would if you bumped into him in the water cooler. You have to think very deliberately, I haven't seen John in a while. I'm going to just ping him and see how he's doing. But to just throw up your hands and say, well, I'm sorry, he's in Kentucky, and so he just takes his career in his hands. It's just really myopic, I think. The world is much different now.
Mm-hmm. Tell everyone about Java with Jill.
Oh, my Javas. Well, that's where Random Coffee came from. When I was in the office, I would pick random people from different departments and different levels in the organization to, one, get to know each other, because it's so amazing to me. You can be in the same tower on a different floor and never meet somebody. You think, what in the heck?
You can work in a company for years, right? Literally, you can work. I've worked in companies for years where I've never met the person that I walk past every day upstairs.
Even funnier, we would go around the room, tell us a little bit about yourself, and then tell one thing that's kind of a surprise or something you normally wouldn't tell somebody. But as they're going around, you'd hear, Wendy would go, well, and I'm in IT and I work on it. And then Bob would go, Wendy, hi, we've been talking for 5 years and it's so great to meet you. And I'm like, are you serious right now? You have never met in person? They'd be like, no, because we just, on the help desk. And then there they were talking, and that was fascinating to me. But it was really very informal to get to know employees and each other, and then just to tap in from an HR perspective, because I was new to the role, new to HR. And I said, what advice do you have for me? What do you really want to see as an employee of this company? Because they're my customer, right? Just like when you're in operations, you look at the external customer. To me, in my role, I'm having to make sure that my internal customer is happy. And so it was a combination of those two things. And then from that, when the pandemic hit, we just would start to do it randomly on Zoom and kept that going. And then we thought, well, why don't we just let other people do their own? And so, Chris, if you want to meet somebody new, you get 30 minutes to just sit down. And now that people are back in the office, we have it on Wednesday mornings. Come on down to the cafe, you get a free cup of coffee, you put your name in a hat, you pick a name, and you just sit down and chat with somebody you never met.
It's so
really
tactile.
cool.
I love it. And also that's an exciting reason to come in the office. Like that's a
think so.
I think so. That's pretty cool. And especially,
well, here's a really cool example. One of our leaders in IT at the parent company did it. He met some guy over in our auto division who was younger, and he agreed to stay in touch with him, and they kind of mentored for 6 months. And then a job came open in the IT department, and he hired him. He would have never known him or met him had he not just taken 30 minutes out of a Wednesday to randomly meet some dude over an auto. It was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the connections start to happen.
It's interesting you just said that, because my friend, I was having a conversation last night with a good friend of mine, and he was saying he did something similar in his company, and he was talking to this individual, having a great chat, and they didn't even talk about job titles, what they do. It was really just more personal stuff. And then he got invited to a meeting maybe like 2 weeks later because this individual wanted his insights. And it was actually the managing director of the company. And he had no idea. So he turned up to this meeting. And he was like, it's a board meeting. And that person's actually at the head of the table, and he's the MD of the whole company. And,
oh my God.
And he was like, he just felt like, anyone else in the business was super down to earth. And, he didn't come across as if, not that he should come across that you're an MD of a company, but it was just, it took him back, and again, that connection would never have happened. And there was a particular area that Joel had identified where they had some inefficiencies, and he wanted to bring Joel into the room to explain how they felt. And he was just ranting about ideas he had, not knowing,
wow,
or frustrations, let's say, not knowing that this individual was the managing director of the company. It worked out well in the end. It's almost like an undercover boss moment.
It wasn't a career limiting move.
No, it was a good move, because it was a genuine, it came from a good place. He was really,
I love that.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you want to have happen when people are getting together.
Yeah. How has it been in terms of communicating all of this to your leaders, though? Because I think leaders and managers have been under a lot of pressure. Not only are they dealing with their own personal change and the impact it's having, but now they're having to, lead with empathy, have conversations around mental health and well-being more, for example, now than ever. We're asking a lot of our leaders right now.
We are asking a great deal of our leaders right now, and I like to say to them, now you're being asked to lead and not manage, right? Because the face of HR, particularly in our company, excuse me, has changed dramatically. Move from more bureaucratic and procedures and policies, and HR said they leaned on that a lot. And a couple of years ago, we embarked on this journey that we called EX Lab, Employee Experience Lab, and we put teams together from all over the company, the different divisions, and we asked them to solve a particular HR section. So we started with everything from recruitment, onboarding, talent development, all the way to offboarding. And we had teams of about 12 to 15 people, and we put them through design thinking so that they had to do it in a very scientific way. They interviewed employees, they interviewed other companies, they had to do research and look at what best in class was. And then they had to come up with what they believed we should be doing differently, or they validated what we are doing in each of the journey maps along the way. And that was an amazing experience for a lot of people, because it was great development and they met different people, but they had to make decisions about something that wasn't really in their bailiwick. This was finance people and supply chain people. But out of that, it was a 2-year journey. We changed a lot of things in the program. But our leaders would be like, well, wait a minute, you're not telling me what to do. We're like, no, you have to lead, you have to decide. Great example, we came up with unlimited PTO for exempt people. Well, oh my gosh, that was so radical, because they're like, well, what if somebody comes in and says they want 4 months off? I'm like, well, what would you tell them now? Well, HR, the policy is, and I said, no, see, that's not leading, that's managing. And so I think there's been a big shift, and I think definitely during the pandemic, because they couldn't see people every minute, right? They were on Zoom. They had to trust them to do the work. And it forced a lot of our leaders to start letting go of, I've got to control everything, into, let me set the accountabilities, let's together figure out the goals, and then I check in. And if you're performing, that's great, and you do the work when you want to do. So I think there's already been a big shift in how our people leaders behave than they did prior to the pandemic. And the team agreements were, for me, a really good example of that. A couple struggled because they're like, I want them here every day. And we're like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So how do we change the way you think about that? Mm-hmm. And they have, and they're embracing that. So I think it's forcing the conversation and not hand-holding. That really has helped.
Was that a new idea? So was something you've done before in previous companies? I love the fact that you put it, rather than this isn't owned by HR. This is owned by every leader in the organization, and you brought together.
Yeah. I will say, so I was in operations my whole career until this role. I was a COO for one of our divisions. And when our CEO and chairman of the parent company, he came on, he's fourth generation of a family, which is just incredible in itself. Most of them don't last past 2. But this family is very committed to operating businesses and succession planning and getting the next in line. And the former HR person was going to retire, and he asked me if I would consider moving from being in operations and running the cable division to being head of HR and operations at the parent company. And I said, no way, not even. I mean, I love operations, and I've been groomed to run a company. And he said, but you could influence 55,000 people. I'm giving you carte blanche to create, what you want and make this culture even better. And that was pretty enticing. And I've been at the company at that point, 35 years or something. And I thought, this company has given me so much opportunity. I really should give back in a different way. But when I got over there, it was a lot of what you have seen in the past with HR still being very, well, that's the policy, that's the procedure. And so I just applied thinking like an operations person rather than thinking, very sequentially about, well, that's the policy. And I came up with the EX Lab idea of getting everybody involved in creating their future. And then it just kind of took off. All the HR professionals got involved and excited, and they had to have business plans and things that they hadn't had to do in the past. And we put a lot of discipline into the function. And now we're attracting a lot of people who are coming from different functions to be in the HR space. So we have a good combination of folks who have grown up in the profession and those who have come from the business. So they felt the pain points of being an employee or a leader, and they're bringing their best thinking together. And I think it's been really quite magical. It's fun watching it.
I think it's a great idea. I think the fact that you put it in their hands as well, and I'm sure they definitely have a newfound appreciation for the work that the HR team does.
Yeah.
I bet, right?
Yeah.
Have you seen a decrease in the amount of leaders coming to you in the team now? And now they're,
Yeah, we've elevated. But here's the other thing though. And, we were way behind the 8 ball on automation and, making things available on your phone and self-help, because we held their hand on absolutely everything. Every form, everything the HR partner did. And so part of the EX Lab was, we got to get away from that, because particularly the next gens, millennials and Gen Z, they're like, I know how to operate a phone. I can get in there and I can do my own performance management. So we are now implementing Workday, new platform. We had Oracle for 1,000 years. We're going to roll that out in June, and that will be a game changer for all of the EX Lab ideas. Required automation and required self-help, and we couldn't do that. So in the next year, we're going to see some things really exploding, that both employees, but leaders in particular, are going to be doing all of their stuff just on their own. They're not going to need an HR professional to help them. What they need that for is really complex strategic thinking, right? Org design and development. And gosh, we've got a problem that we're too top heavy. How do we deal with that? How am I supposed to grow my leaders, and succession planning? Those are the things that our HR professionals should be dealing with, not whether or not somebody punched in a time clock right. That's just ludicrous. People can figure that stuff out.
100%. And also from a massive increase in the employee experience. You know,
Absolutely.
You don't want to do it. You shouldn't have to wait a week to get a reply of how many holidays you got left.
Yeah.
I'm using a silly example, but these are things that are frustrating. Or I want to check in and see what my benefits are, or, you know, we can keep going on. And that shouldn't take up time from them. It shouldn't take up time from you and the team. And,
That's exactly
for those leaders to have that data and insights in a dashboard, to see engagement data, to see, you know, whatever it may be, just to have that at the power of their hands, that is going to encourage them more to lead than manage.
Yes.
And also give them that confidence, right, and comfort that they can see the output as a, you know.
Exactly. And
well.
I think also for HR professionals, it's more rewarding.
Oh, of course,
you can continue to deal with that crap. They want to deal with really meaty issues, and you know, we continue to push with the business leaders. The HR group are your business partners. They should be at the table for everything. HR used to be, at the end you go see them because you need to fire a bunch of people and you want to make sure that you don't have an issue. But now it should be, let's have them at your staff meetings, at the table, so that they are part of all your decision making, because people are at the core of everything that you do. So they should be involved in that. And that makes for a more rewarding job for the HR folks. But it's also, it cuts out a lot of problems for the business leaders because they have them at the table at the start.
Mm-hmm. So really, you're going through two big transformations, one both culturally and from a technology perspective, you're on that journey, because these things are ingrained in organizations of how people were managed before them and before them, before them. It's going to take time. It's not like an overnight thing, but you do want new people coming into the organization and to understand this is what it means to work at Cox. Like this is how we lead, and this is what it means. So
absolutely,
it must be quite exciting for you then.
It's been very rewarding. I will tell you, people that come in, they're like, when they talk to people and they interview, they always say, what is going on here? Because people are so happy and they're so nice and it's so employee focused, and it is. And, I've been there so long, I don't know any different. I didn't come from a different company, but I hear that time and time again as people come into our organization. And I think that stems from being a family held business. The values of our company are not, a bunch of C-suite people who stood in front of a whiteboard and go, well, employees are important, aren't they? Maybe we should put that at. That's a good value. This came from the founder of our company. He sat his kids down and he said, listen, everything we have and built in this company is on the backs of our employees. Never forget that. They are our most important asset. We are local. We're newspapers. We have to give back to the communities that we serve. We also have a world view, and we need to make sure that we leave the place better than it was. All of those are our corporate values. And I never knew that until years later, that it literally was the family values. And it just got ingrained in every leader all the way down. And I love that, because it really comes from the heart. It's not just, they think, you have to put it out there. It's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that permeates every decision that's made. At Cox, it always starts with the employee, which is very interesting. You don't see that at most companies.
Yeah.
And it is true at our company.
No, I love that. Well, listen, before I let you go, I want to jump into our quick fire round. So this is something we do whenever we don't warn anyone.
Okay.
So this is coming. So I'm going to ask you some questions, but you only have 30 seconds per question. All right. What are your hobbies and passions outside of the office?
Travel. COVID put a big damper on that crap, so I'm getting ready to go do that. And I love to read and entertain. Those would be my biggies.
Where are you off to next? Have you got a destination already?
We are going to Ireland this summer. Well, first I'm taking my daughter for her high school graduation to London in 2 weeks, and then we're off to Ireland, and then Vietnam the end of the year.
Wow.
Told you, I pent up travel fever here. Gotta go.
You're making it happen. Love it. If you could click your fingers and change one thing about HR, what would you change?
I think it would be that business partnership, that people viewed them as a true business partner at the table and, able to give them very strategic advice.
Mm-hmm. How do you think that your family and friends would describe what you do for a living?
I don't know if they really get, my youngest would say it's boring. I just sit in meetings all day and talk to people. That was her idea of mine when I took her to work. But I think my older two, they're really proud of me, and they understand that I have an important job and that I influence a lot in the company and make a difference for employees. So I think they like what I do.
Yeah. On that point then of the kids, what legacy do you want to leave behind for your kids?
I think the biggest for me is making a difference in people's lives and helping to pull young talent up and, create the next generation of leaders, and that they would see that I made a difference in a lot of employees' lives. That's important to me.
Mm-hmm. One of my next questions was, have you ever considered a new career? But you've done that.
I did.
Because you worked in operations for, did you say over 20 years? Did you say?
Yes, 35. I've only been in this role 5 years. I grew up in operations. That was my love and my heart. And so, it found me. I didn't find it.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning to leave. I think that's how life works though, right?
No, I love that.
It presents itself, and there it is.
Yeah. Who would you say is the one person in your career that's had the biggest impact on you?
I don't think there's one person. There were several along the way, and I was lucky to have bosses who saw something in me and, beat me up when I needed it and gave me the tough love, but also made sure I didn't self-implode. So there were several in my career that I was very lucky to have.
Well, it sounds good. And something must have been right, because they kept you there that long.
Exactly.
So it's very well. And then last question, what advice would you give sort of to the HR leaders of tomorrow that are coming up to the ranks to sit in that seat one day where you are?
I would say be open to the possibility that you might go somewhere else and come back, right? You don't necessarily have to stay in the same role, and maybe you shouldn't stay in the same role. It's always good to get perspectives from the business. And I also think it's good to take risks. People get too comfortable, and then, they're in a role for 25 years and they suddenly go, I want to do something different. So do it earlier. Find all the things and enjoy life, because it does go pretty quick. I promise you that.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks for coming on the show, Jill. Super excited. It's interesting. We started the conversation and I was like, I've been speaking to so many leaders that have just come into the role of HR leader. And you're like, that's me, Chris. Here you are now. But I can already see, talking about your last piece of advice, you mentioned about taking risks, different roles. And I'm sure you probably agree, without that role, your experience in operations, you wouldn't have brought the unique perspective and insights that you have now, sitting in your seat today, right? Yeah,
completely true. I think it was a really good experience for the role I'm in now.
Amazing. And then last question, where can people connect with you personally if they want to reach out and say hi?
Sure, I'm on LinkedIn, so it's where everybody goes, but also I can be reached on my work email, which is jill.campbell@coxinc.com.
Amazing. Well, look, enjoy the countryside,
yes,
the relaxing tranquility, and enjoy your trip. And I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Chris. Take care.